Welcome to Still Serving, the VFW podcast, the official podcast of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And now, from the VFW Memorial Building in Washington, D.C., here's your host, Rob Couture.
And welcome to Still Serving. I'm your host, Rob Couture. Let's get right into it. Roll call. Joining me for the first time in the program, Associate Director for National Legislative Service, Ms. Nancy Springer. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, wonderful. And back from his command visit, the Assistant Adjutant General and Executive Director for the VFW Washington office, Mr. Ryan Gallucci.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Great to be back.
And of course, my co-host, Brittany, Dymond Murray, Associate Director for Communications and Public Affairs here in the Washington office. Brittany, thank you again. I see you're wearing green. We'll get into that later on and why you're wearing green. I don't know if it was necessarily because of who won yesterday, but...
No, really, it's about the overabundance of green wardrobe items that I have.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really it.
Maybe...
And these earrings happen to match them.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Really, no, but...
You would think...
You could speculate, though. I would understand.
You would think it would be like an army thing because you have so much green. But
no, not today.
Not from that time. All right. So, hey, let's get into it. What do we have for, first of all, the agenda?
Our agenda today, let's see. So we've already done a roll call. We're going to touch on some unfinished business, which is it's continuation of stuff that we've spoken about in the past.
Right.
Or just updates about, VFW priorities and so on and so forth. We're going to chat about new business. So Ryan and VFW delegation just returned from troop visits overseas. So Ryan's going to talk about that a bit. And then both me and Nancy were at hearings last week. So we both testified in front of Congress last week. So we're going to touch on that. And then we're also going to discuss the potential Secretary VA, his confirmation hearing. So and then we're going to close out, per usual, with good of the order.
With the good of the order. Well, that's great. I think that when it comes to the good of the order, I know a lot of people, I want to talk about the playoffs and the Super Bowl coming up. I know a lot of people feel disappointed about the way it goes. I know people in our headquarters in Kansas City are very happy their Chiefs won. So, unfortunately, it was a loss for Washington, and so we don't get to root for anybody unless, you like the Chiefs or
the Eagles.
Yeah, hence the green.
Right, Brittany been flying. That's
and Chief.
That is
Past Commander-in-Chief Dwayne Sarmiento. I saw him with a post, and he was decked out in his Eagle stuff. So we know who he's voting for. That's right over the border there from South Jersey,
right? Yeah,
Pennsylvania.
No uncertainty.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. First thing we wanted to get into was Ryan's. Oh no, unfinished business. I'm sorry, unfinished business.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to finish the unfinished business.
Let's finish it. So, Brittany, kick us off.
But it's never really finished, so
that's why it's unfinished. That's right. It's on point.
It's fine. Okay, so it's January. It's the beginning of the new year, and with that comes refreshed VFW legislative priorities. And so you can find it on VFW at vfw.org/advocacy if you want to check out the VFW's 2025 priority goals, as they're called, legislative priority goals. And what they are essentially the VFW's, our National Legislative Services marching orders for the year. So they're derived from our resolutions. We're a resolutions-based organization.
Very good.
And so they cover the gamut from Disability Assistance Memorial Affairs, which is what Nancy covers, and the National Legislative Service, or NLS, to VA healthcare and military service members, those currently serving, and even POW MIA initiatives.
Right. And so when it comes to these priority goals, this is stuff that we advocate for on Capitol Hill with the VA, with the current administration, about things that we want to see for our veterans. And I'm just saying all this stuff for people that are like, what do you mean by priority goals? Well, I mean, we're advocacy. We advocate for veterans here on Capitol Hill. That's why they have us here. So that's why we have these from year to year, and that changes. And so it's important for us to do a relook and a refresh at our priority goals.
Yes. And an important point here is that these are priority goals. So they're broad, they're overarching. And so there's no specific legislation on this list. and that's by design. So there's a whole gamut of issues that we'll advocate on, but these are pretty much guidelines. And then from there, we'll look at legislation that aligns with these guidelines. So think about it kind of like that. So,
Right.
and then likewise, also at vfw.org /advocacy, you can also watch throughout the year the entire Congress of which bills that we're tracking and VFW supports. So it's a good time of the year to start off and see what we're focused on.
That's a really good point because everything starts fresh in the new Congress. And so last year, as we were closing out, there were hundreds of bills on the bills list supported by the VFW. Now it's a little bit shorter because the new Congress was just sworn in. So there's really only a handful of bills that we're starting to track right now.
Right. And Ryan, this is something we had talked about in the last podcast is we start, Pat said it, we start fresh all over with this 119 Congress. That doesn't mean that there's still not the same players, but we have new members of Congress now. They have new positions. They have new committee members, new chairmans of committees. So this is something that we have to be able to go back in. And they can't just take old legislation and start with the new Congress, can they, Ryan?
Nope, that's not how it works. It might be the same text.
Okay.
So a good example that I'll talk to in a little bit is our advocacy for service members, for veterans overseas who use the VA Foreign Medical Program. We were the first organization to work to have legislation introduced last year, and it's been reintroduced for this Congress, which is really important. I'll get to all the reasons why it's important in a little bit. But, right before the new Congress was seated, there was a hearing on VA community care. There were a series of bills that were discussed, and that was really to kind of lay the groundwork for where Congress wanted to go in the new session. And then just last week, which kind of will lead into new business, that was the hearing that you testified at, was talking about where Congress is going with it. So these priority goals, they evolve. We see incremental wins every single time. In the last Congress with the Dole Act, not just a number act, became law, which was a big win for the VFW. It's something that we've been asking for almost a decade. So we were very excited about that. So that would come off of our priority goals. Now it's implementation. But these are our marching orders. And again, it comes from our resolutions. Every year when NLS, the National Legislative Service, is putting this together, we'll sit down and make sure, okay, are we covering what our members have asked us to cover, what the delegates to the National Convention put forward in our resolutions? And so this year, there are some new additions.
There are. So Ryan already alluded to one focused on improving veterans' access to healthcare overseas, so foreign medical program. There's also another one on here in the realm of healthcare, more broadly VA healthcare, as researching the efficacy of plant-based alternative therapies for post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's pretty exciting. I know, there's no one-size-fits-all solution for veterans who live with post-traumatic stress disorder or any ailment or injury for that matter. And so it's important to kind of understand. We're trying to understand the breadth of what's possible in terms of healthcare and helping veterans get the care that they need.
Right. And this is not to get into that conversation because that could be a whole nother
It's a whole other.
It probably will be in the future.
But our partnership, our recent partnership
Very
that we've
recent.
come into with Grunt Style, and that's something that they were looking for. We have the advocacy experience, they have the energy. This is something that's been near and dear. And let's be honest, there's a lot. I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. There's a lot of us that are that have been prescribed a lot of the opioids, right, during our time, and some of them are hard to kick. They're hard to get off of, and you are just as addicted to some of these things as you would be. Now I'm getting on my soapbox, right? But this is why
I said it was another episode. I know. But Rob, you're right. And look, the Grunt Style Foundation has really been great to work with out of the gate because I think we finally honed in on something that's been obvious to the veteran community for quite some time. It's that whatever we're doing to address mental health, mental wellness, suicide prevention, isn't working the way we're hoping that it would work.
Right.
So exploring these alternative therapies, making sure that it's not a prescribe first type of model. Funny story, it probably should be for the good of the order or for that other episode, is going through my nightstand last night and found a bunch of old pill bottles from things that VA had put me on that I was afraid to try.
Well, they're all empty pill bottles, I hope.
Oh, no, they're still full.
All right. Talk about safety and your medicine cabinet there, Executive Director.
We do, but that's another episode, like you said. So, but we're glad that's on the priority goals.
It is very glad. But there are some other, there are some items on here that are, consistent issues, like the problem of concurrent receipt. A lot of our members care about concurrent receipt for good reason. And what that is just, it's the offset between disability pay and retirement pay. And so that is an issue that a lot of veterans experience. And so VFW is always paying attention and pushing for legislation to fix the offset problem.
Right.
For compensation, disability, and retirement pay.
And you don't have to go through them all.
No.
I would say that's maybe that we.
Of course not, but there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of good stuff in here just to get an idea of what the VFW cares about, what our members care about. So it's
Right.
definitely a good document to review.
And a lot of these, it's good to point out because we're going to get to this with regards to our new business, right? The advocacy efforts, what comes from that, when you testify, when you go on command visits, all these things go into our priority goals. We go out there, we get this information in our conversations with staffers and our conversations with the VA, with veterans, what we're doing with, helping veterans with benefits. All that goes back into our advocacy efforts, and then it becomes a priority. Now, so people know that it's not just, hey, NLS, you all just get together and put this together. No, there's a whole VFW, like bringing together committees and councils and that sort of thing.
Right, and it starts like 6-7 months prior at our annual conventions everywhere, where our members give us the marching orders, things they want us to pay attention to for the following year.
Yeah, quick shameless plug on that. For our members who are listening or watching this podcast, that's where good ideas start. Like the Justice for ALS Veterans started as an idea with a VFW member in the state of Virginia. The foreign medical program issue was raised by VFW members who are still serving the military community overseas in Europe and Asia. And we're always looking for that new idea that's going to really change the way we take care of our veterans for the better.
Right, and some of these things, they're like of no cost. You know what I mean?
Some
Or
of them
they're
are
already paid
expensive.
for.
Yeah.
Right, they're already paid for by, let's take, for instance, foreign mail, right? So the APOA, there's just involved with that, but,
Are we getting into new business?
well, maybe we should. But anyway, and that's a good point.
And that actually segues nicely into troop visits.
It does segue
Yeah.
nicely. But
Oh, great segment.
before we let that go, one more time, Brittany, where can people find our priority goals?
VFW.org/advocacy.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And also, if you are coming to the Washington conference, you'll be able to get those in a printout right here, and then maybe take a few of them back with you to your post. Why not?
And
Share the love.
they'll also be in an upcoming issue of the VFW magazine.
Here we go.
So we put it out anywhere that our members or a veteran might be able to find it.
And probably something we put on social media as well. So people that are following us on Facebook or YouTube, you can follow the link below or just click like, and I'm sure it'll be there. So, or click follow. I don't know. Okay, so let's get to some new business. And at the top of this, Ryan, you went on a
Yes.
visit to Europe.
Yes.
This was no like all expense paid trip to Euro Disney in France or anything, was it?
No, we didn't go to France.
Oh.
Oh,
Right. So why don't you talk a little bit about the visit?
Where did
Sure.
you go?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, where did we go? No, so the VFW every year, we schedule command visits to visit with service members overseas, the veterans who support them in their community, and to hear from leadership about the scope of the mission. And so just on January 7th, a delegation, we went wheels up to Belgium to visit with Strategic Headquarters Allied Powers Europe, which is a NATO entity. and then
Shape, as it's called.
Shape, yes, Shape, and then went on to Germany to visit with a number of key commands over there, whether it was EUCOM, AFRICOM, and then the subordinate Air Force, Army commands, Medical Command. It was command visit for Senior Vice Commander in Chief Carol Whitmore. She's for those who don't know Carol, she's a former Army nurse, and so medical care is very important to her. And so these visits were incredibly powerful. So the way that we orchestrate this is usually reaching out to DoD or those major combatant commands and asking to sit down with the leaders and decision makers, but also to spend time with service members who are deployed, or not deployed, but stationed, as it is with Europe, to find out what we're asking our force to do today overseas. Now, the reason we do this, we're the veterans of foreign wars. It says it right there. It does.
Right here on our nice polos. And even in our Cross of Malta, it says that.
Yes. That's who we are. That's our common bond. We all served overseas. We all went somewhere to defend the ideals of our nation and defend our interests. And so we never forget that. And as a matter of fact, the VFW has a vibrant Department of Europe and a vibrant Department of Pacific areas that we like to say are still serving. But largely supporting American interests. So whether they're working as Department of Defense civilians or contractors supporting the military mission abroad and supporting the veteran community abroad, it's incredibly important work, and it always informs the work that we discussed under Old Business, advancing our priority goals.
Yeah.
Right. And so one of those was the foreign medical program. And also we talked about mail. There was different instances where retirees are not allowed to use the mail. And then we're like, hey, look, I know you're doing some cost cutting or whatever it is, but they can't get their medication. They're having a hard time with some of their payments. And so from these visits, we learn these lessons. It's almost like a fact-finding mission.
It is absolutely a fact-finding mission. And the APO mail issue for military retirees, I'm glad you brought that one up, because the VFW played a small role in that. Look, our members overseas played a much larger role than our office, but we did write letters. We made sure that they got to the right people. But I really want to give a lot of credit to the retiree councils in many of these overseas locations. So I think they did a ton of the legwork alongside the VFW posts and VFW leaders who were overseas to make sure that this issue wasn't forgotten. In November of last year, DoD issued a final memorandum that basically said, okay, we were wrong. Those APO privileges are going to continue for retirees. It provides some strong peace of mind. Certainly for those who rely on those systems. There are still some kinks that probably need to be worked out. We heard that loud and clear from the retiree councils and from the VFW members while Carol and I were over there. But there's been progress. And that's another one that we were really eager to bring forward, is with the foreign medical program. So the VFW, we were the first to start talking about this as a national security issue. Last year, VFW Commander-in-Chief Dwayne Sarmiento, in his hearing before the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, he identified it just as that. And that seemed to perk up a lot more interest. That, wait, what are you talking about? This is a national security risk? And yes, absolutely it is. Because most of the veterans who are overseas are, again, working for DoD. They're supporting American military interests. And the way that the unstructured foreign medical program works now is they're just going out in the economy to find a doctor to treat them. I can't see how that could be risky.
Depending on where they are, absolutely.
Absolutely could. I remember when I was serving in Germany back in, I guess it's been 22 years ago now, but in 2003. And we were there. It was the 1st Infantry Division. I was stationed in Würzburg, Germany at the time. And, we had all of our support there. And then they came back from their deployment to Iraq, which was like 18 months long. I'm sure that you remember those long deployments, right, Ryan? At least during that time. And so they came back from their deployment, and then they started closing up shop everywhere, left and right. And so those that were still there on the installation were told, we were all given letters, you're now going to have to go to the economy for your doctor. What? Are you serious? Yeah. And then so we had to deal with that as you were closing down all these support systems. So I got a little bit of a taste of what it was like to be retired and overseas. And for some people that's a choice. And yeah, it's always a choice. But the so ish, but supporting the DoD and they bring a wealth of knowledge and experience. And we're not just talking about some guy that retired and that now works in CIF. Those guys are really important. Those guys and gals that work over there in CIF, making sure people are getting their equipment. We're talking about people that are very much integral to the commands that are there.
We're talking civilian advisors that negotiate with
Subject matter experts too.
with allied governments, allied militaries. That's subject matter experts. And you brought up an interesting one too about the closures and compressing the American military footprint. There have been expansions and contractions within Europe over time, and that was one of the takeaways from this visit is that infrastructure needs are still very real for Americans who are stationed overseas. Right now, we're in the middle of building a replacement hospital for Landstuhl. Our delegation was able to visit that new facility. They have a building, which is good, and it was really placed in a way that is much more efficient for our mission. It's adjacent to Ramstein Air Base, whereas before it was a locally coordinated ambulance ride up the side of a mountain to get into Landstuhl. Nancy's nodding. The logistics were a challenge. One of the takeaways for our delegation too was that some of the challenges that existed in the 70s still exist today. Whether it's transportation for young service members or more junior service members who may not be accompanied on the tour or may live on base or on post or don't have a car. And there are also cultural differences. We were sitting down with UCOM and having lunch with some of the UCOM troops as well as the UCOM chief of staff who spent an inordinate amount of time with us and gave us a really good framework from which to work off of the rest of the visit. But the civilian chief of staff, who's a former ambassador, she was there, and she had probably the most pithy comment of the visit. And she said, when people hear that you're stationed in Europe, there's not much sympathy for it. They're like, oh, it's Europe, really, but it's different.
Right.
It's culturally different from the United States, and especially if you're a junior service member who certainly hasn't lived overseas before, there are things that are culturally different. And there will be culture shocks. There will be things that are difficult to navigate. And it's our responsibility as the VFW to not only advocate for them on the ground with the VFW comrades in the Department of Europe, but also here in Washington to make sure that the Pentagon is making smart decisions about how they're serving our military men and women overseas.
I mean, because we are part of NATO, right? And there's the NATO mission that we have on the Eastern Flank. The year before you went, Ryan,
Yes.
and visited troops that we had. Actually, it was 2 years ago.
Was it in Poland?
Sort of, yeah, it was
It was a
2 years ago now.
where you were visiting with troops in Poland and they're on the Eastern Flank of NATO. And so some of those, that was like if you were an old Cold War veteran and you were stationed in Germany in the Fulda Gap, you weren't leaving when you were on notice. I mean, that was not like you go out and get your liberty to go out and visit the bars or wherever in Munich, right, for Oktoberfest or yeah. So you weren't really doing a lot of that stuff because you were on mission. The same thing with our folks over there. Yeah, I'm sure that they had some downtime to go and explore, parts of Europe that were, I guess accessible to them, but nevertheless, it was a deployment.
And this is one of the challenges, too, that service members who are stationed in Europe are facing as well. So if you're stationed there, especially if you're accompanied, if you have a family that accompanied you overseas, that may not be the last place you go. And we saw that with Commander-in-Chief Al Liphart when we visited Italy this fall as well. Is airmen will PCS to Aviano Air Base, but then because of the op-tempo for the Air Force, that service member is going even further downrange to support those missions on the eastern flank of NATO or in the Middle East or in Africa, because that's really the scope of the operation that they're talking about today.
Yeah. And let's not forget, we still have people in the Horn of Africa and in the Middle East.
True.
Well, that's probably one of the strongest takeaways that we want to bring back, and it's one of the reasons that I was eager to come back on the podcast to talk about it, is Americans can make no mistake that our service members are still very engaged in a very real-world mission, a very high-stakes mission overseas. Again, we're the VFW. It's our job to remind Americans of that, but we ask our young men and women to do some very important work to protect not just of our borders, but to protect our interests overseas and project our power against those who would want to do us harm.
So what would you say was the biggest takeaway for Carol? I know you're not Carol.
Well, I'm not Carol.
But I know that you had a lot.
We'll talk about that on another episode of Tune In next time on these.
But I know that you had a lot of side discussions. Is this something that is it going to carry over into her command year?
Absolutely, and that's the point. That's one of the reasons why we bring our senior vice commander in chief, our junior vice commander in chief on some of these overseas visits. It's for them to understand the lay of the land and to start developing priorities that they'll have for their year or initiatives that they believe that the VFW should be pushing. Again, for Carol, given her military background, it's about healthcare and delivery of care for not just veterans who rely on the Foreign Medical Program, but for active duty service members and their families. We heard that loud and clear from the service members that we met with frequently, that care can be tough to navigate, that there are upfront costs to pursuing care in the community, even if you're on TRICARE, and especially if it's for a family member. So these are real challenges that military families face when they're serving overseas, and it's our duty to make sure that we're addressing those with DHA, with the Pentagon, and with Congress when necessary. There is a concern, Europe. I said it before, but we've contracted our forces, we've expanded our forces, we've contracted our forces, we've moved east into Poland, we've dispersed rotational forces throughout the region to deter challenges, deter aggression.
Right.
I mean, again, I'd say 2.5 missions. So they are directly responsible for Europe and the eastern flank of NATO. They are directly responsible for AFRICOM, but they also provide the medical support for CENTCOM.
Oh,
yes, because nothing is going on in CENTCOM.
yeah, right.
But and so I think Carol saw it that there should be concerns about the ability to deliver care to the scale that we might need it in the region, and it's something that I believe will be forefront in her mind. But when we have her on the show, we'll ask her.
Right. Great point. And I think what we need to understand is the world is ever changing. The threats are always changing, right? So one of the things to being a lethal and ready force is to be able to have, because with lethality, it's a high contact sport within the military, and people are going to get killed and people are going to get wounded. And so you need to have, I know it's Afghanistan ended in 2021. But we lost people when that closed out. We had people injured, and we needed to still have that Ramstein, Launchstuhl, connection, flights in, medical care right there. And a lot of people at that point in time were like, we don't, hey, you know what? Barely anything's happened in Afghanistan. So you never know when things are going to change. That's my point.
That's a really good point. And there was another takeaway from all of these visits that can't be understated. And that's the status of the force today and the Americans who are volunteering to serve in our military. What's awe-inspiring about these visits, we've talked a lot about the challenges, healthcare, logistics, this, that, the other. The force is motivated, and the force finds the mission rewarding. So
really these Gen Zers who they're just on their phones all the time, worried about doing anything else, just playing Call of Duty?
Well,
Well, maybe there's some of that.
they're not joining the military. But the Americans who choose to join the military are really taking part in an authentic experience. I look, and I know that as they're setting up these visits, we're sitting down with service members who may be hand selected. I don't know, but look, the service members that we sat down with across all of the ranks, there's a reason that they're in the military, and there's a reason that they're serving overseas. They want to be serving overseas. They want to be doing something that matters. And military service offers that authenticity. Even with the challenges that come with military service, look, that's for us to worry about. That's why we're an advocacy organization. And even if it seems like, you're focusing on the negatives, it's like, look, we're focusing on the negatives because someone needs to. But the force, they're focusing on the job. And, the number of service members who say, I'm doing something that matters, I'm doing something that's relevant, I'm doing something that I can be proud of, that's across the board. And that's something that we should scream from these microphones or from our building here in DC. And I think a lot of young Americans need to hear that. If you're considering, why would I join the military? Like, Rob, you made a career out of it. I didn't. And so, but
that's okay.
And that's okay.
Because you're good enough. You're smart enough. And doggone it.
People like you.
But to be frank,
or Ryan. But anyway, I digress.
Okay, geez. No, I think I'm better off for having served in the military. And I think many Americans feel the same way.
I would agree.
Like
100%.
The military is, 80% of the military is supposed to get out before retirement.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at why would a young American join the military, it's for that authentic experience. It's for understanding something bigger than yourself and realizing what you are capable of, and especially what you are capable of when you're a member of a team and putting something, representing something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, when I joined the military back in '96, I was looking for a better opportunity for my family. But at the same time, I was like, man, I get to do this, pursue a career that I want, and I get to serve my country at the same time. Like, it's a win-win all the way around. There was no war happening in '96. I know some people were like, we were looking at Haiti and there were some other things. Got it. But, I tell you, once I got in, I fell in love with service. And for anybody that's out there and they're considering joining the military, tell you what, my life was forever changed. My family's life was forever changed. There's good and bad with all those things. I mean, like I said, it's a contact sport. But, I'm so happy that I served. And I can say, as a veteran of foreign war, that one day when my granddaughter asks, Papa, what did you do during the war? I could say, I was there. Let me tell you, no kidding. Afghanistan twice over. And, okay. But nevertheless, so great. I'm glad that you guys had a good visit. It's important. We have an upcoming visit. I'm going to be going to Southeast Asia to look at the DPAA mission. But in between there, we have a big advocacy effort, which is going to be our kind of like part two. I wouldn't say part two. It's our Washington conference, but advocacy is a big portion of that. And speaking of advocacy, I'm just going to jump over, if you don't mind,
Sure.
because, you've been awfully quiet there, Nancy, and I want to hear from you. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. You were in the Marine Corps, am I right?
I was in the Marine Corps for 30 years. And I served at Camp Lejeune, served at Camp Lejeune 3 times, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, Pendleton, Miramar, Hawaii, 3 times Okinawa, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bahrain.
Woo. You really did a lot of those deployments, didn't you?
And the one I missed, Brittany knows which one I'm going to tell you, I was at the Marine Corps' best duty station as well, which was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Wait a minute, Brittany.
She insists, this is the best.
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, it was my 06 command, so it could have been on Mars and would have been above.
It would have been.
But yeah.
No, you just said that was the command. So you
Yes.
are an officer.
Yes.
And which particular branch within the Marine Corps were you?
Well, the Marine Corps doesn't have branches. We have MOSs,
All right.
military occupational
Right.
specialties. And mine was logistics.
Okay.
So I was a logistics officer.
You're a logistics officer.
Yes.
So how did you get to this point? How did you get from, retiring and then now here you are advocating on behalf of the VFW?
Well, after I retired, I purposely took about 9-10 months and I just traveled around. I went to a whole bunch of different places. And then I got my first civilian job. And to put this into context, that was my first civilian job since my high school summer job. But I came into the military 1 month after my 18th birthday, and I came out almost 34 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So I went to work in 2018, my first civilian job, first one since my summer job.
And so I know my first meeting with you
Mhm.
was across the street at the Hart Senate building. And I was with Al was our commander-in-chief, Al Liphart at the time, I think he was our junior vice, I think. Yeah. And no, he might have been their senior vice.
Or maybe senior.
And we went over to an office for an office call during the Washington conference, and that's where I met you.
Okay.
That's when I met you.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Who were you working for at the time?
Okay. Here's my past since my first civilian job.
Right.
So I worked as a defense contractor for almost 4 years.
Yeah.
And in 2022, I left that because I wanted to come work in Congress.
Huh.
So for several months, I tried to get into Congress, tried to get the LCLA position over across the street, and I was going no place. So I linked up with the Hill Vets Foundation, and I became a Hill Vets Foundation fellow.
Okay.
And I was a fellow in Senator John Ossoff's office from Georgia.
Right.
Now, and I remember we met, and that was my second day as a fellow when the Washington Week contingent came in from Georgia
That's right.
to talk with the senator.
That's
And
right.
took his photo. Yeah, now I remember.
Now you remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know maybe I should have talked about that ahead. Hey, spring that on you,
Yeah,
Nancy
I
Springer.
remember, yeah.
So you got into there, and how did you come across the street to work for the VFW?
Well, my
You saw the job opening? Was that what it was?
so somewhat. I mean, my fellowship was 6 months long,
Mhm.
and it's on us to go find a job afterwards. The Hill Vets Foundation helps with the contacts and the networking and all that,
Right.
but ultimately it's up to us to go find a job or not find a job.
Right.
A couple months before, I'd been at the Department of Virginia Winter Council meeting, and I was talking to Ryan, who is one of my post members, and we got to
Nancy was my post commander.
Yes.
She's now my district commander.
Oh,
Not yet.
everybo's got a boss. That's the way it goes.
So I was talking to Ryan, telling him I was on this fellowship, and we got to talking about employment opportunities at the VFW, and he told me where I could find where you store the open jobs. So I came back, I took a look, there were a couple open, I applied, and about 2 weeks before my fellowship ended, I had an interview with Pat and Christina. First I ever had a job interview with people I actually knew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. And a day or so later, Pat offered me the job. And the day after my fellowship ended, I came over here to work.
And that was when?
That was at the end of February, 20th of February last year, a couple days before the Washington conference.
Wow.
That was my first event, was the Washington conference.
So
Right in. Just right in.
Yeah, I did have a phone.
Right
had,
into it.
No, had nothing.
just right in and
Roll right in.
roll right in.
Off we go.
And I tell you what, so people know, we get the best and brightest when it comes to our advocacy efforts. And I tell you, we don't just put anybody in front of Congress when it comes to hearings. And there's a lot of prep that goes in, a lot of time. I mean, Brittany, you can talk to, you've done it twice. We'll get to yours in a moment after we talk to Nancy about hers. But there was a lot of time spent. I mean, you obviously were there, right? You were there on the other side, so to speak. And now over here, all the research, all the meetings you went to had led to this point last week, which was your first hearing.
It was.
Talk to us a little bit about that. How did it go?
Yeah, to say it was a time commitment is kind of an understatement. Last week, I was absolutely consumed with getting ready for that hearing. At first, I had to do the written testimony, and that has a hard deadline. That is 2 days before the hearing. And since we had a holiday in between, I spent a lot of time getting together that written statement with the question, supporting it from our organizational position.
Right.
And once that was finished, and our administrative assistant made sure it was all correct, set it away.
Ann Markell.
Ann Martell, can't do anything without Ann.
No.
Office runs.
And approved and reviewed documents is what you want.
Yeah.
And once that was done, that was about, I think, 4 pages long. Well, then I had to, from there, compile an oral testimony. And it has to be along the same lines as the written testimony, but I have 5 minutes to get my message across. And this is our organizational position on that question. I am relaying to the audience, to the members on the subcommittee,
Right.
and to the greater audience actually watching on TV.
Right.
So I was absolutely consumed going from that 4-page document to something that was 5 minutes long, practicing it, made sure it sounded exactly the way I wanted it, and get ready for game day.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to submit your oral testimony
No,
at all, right?
no.
So it's just a written portion.
It's just a written portion.
So, but you're practicing this over
Yeah.
and over again. Then you walk over to the building. I mean, they set it up, and hopefully they don't, interrupt and say, "Oh, we got to vote," and then, sorry, that's not going to happen.
Oh, that happens, doesn't it? They're perfectly time, but time.
Yeah, but yours didn't get interrupted, thankfully.
No.
And it was on a, I would say, a very contentious subject.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about VA fiduciaries and how it was with the Second Amendment? I know there's people out there like, wow, talk about a subject to jump in for your first test.
Right. I mean,
No pressure, right?
if you're going to jump in, you might as well jump in all the way.
Yeah.
And that is an issue in my portfolio. And you are absolutely correct. There's a very contentious issue. The fiduciary part really isn't. It's the Second Amendment part that is, because that's a constitutional right.
Right.
Now, just in brief, VA runs a fiduciary program. And for a variety of reasons, VA beneficiaries can't manage their benefits. They may be sick. They may have a disease. They may have dementia. They may be in that status. They're incapable of managing their benefits. They're incompetent.
Right.
And VA, once they determine that person is incompetent, they will assign he or she a fiduciary who's a third-party person that will take in the VA benefits and pay that person's bills.
Okay.
And that could be a family member. Usually the VA beneficiary, the veteran, can choose who he or she wants to be the fiduciary. So a lot of times it's a family member or a friend. And if the veteran doesn't have anybody like that who's willing to do it, VA can hire a professional fiduciary to do that. So it's a third-party person who gets the money. VA will send them then that money for the veteran, and that person will then pay that veteran's bills.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so that's the fiduciary process. And at that point, when
So
VA...
it's like a power of attorney a little bit. Like you have somebody
like that.
there.
It's kind of like an enhanced power of attorney.
Okay, enhanced power of
'Cause
attorney.
my whole VA check is going to you, Rob, and you're going to go out
wow.
and pay my bills. So VA does check out the fiduciary before they assign the veteran to that fiduciary, make sure that person's reputable, make sure they can do it, they want to do it. And then there's a lot of monitoring that goes on of that fiduciary. But at that point, when VA assigns the fiduciary to a veteran, the VA is also considering determining that person is incompetent, mentally incompetent. And that's significant that I just said that, incompetent.
Okay.
Because part 2 of this is VA then sends this incompetent person's name per law, according to the law, to the Department of Justice, and then that person's name gets put on what's called the NICS list, National Instant Criminal Background Check System.
That's crazy.
So this incompetent person's name, and VA has judged this person to be incompetent.
Right.
And during the current process, there is no judicial review. There's no review that specifically determines if that incompetent person is a danger to oneself or others. VA makes that determination. It proposes the determination. The veteran can send in his or her own side, some substantial information, a doctor's note, other kind of information for VA to consider when they're considering if they're going to deem that person incompetent or not. But once VA makes that decision, they are declared incompetent. And according to law, the Gun Control Act of 1968 and the Brady Bill makes VA, it requires a federal agency to give that person's name to be put on the NICS list.
Oh.
So essentially, once you get put on the NICS list, you're prohibited from buying or possessing or receiving or transferring a firearm or ammunition. So essentially, your Second Amendment rights are taken away. And there's been no judicial review in this entire current process, nor has there been a determination that you are a danger to self or others. You just have some kind of condition that is making it impossible for you to manage your bills at this point.
Wow.
So Nancy, one of the things I noticed in that hearing is, and again, I really appreciate the level of detail that you put into this, is that there were a lot of people talking about hypotheticals.
Yes.
But you walked in with practical examples and practical recommendations on what VA could do better. Can you walk us through what some of those might be?
Yeah, sure. It's a very emotional issue because we're dealing with a constitutional right, especially the Second Amendment right.
Right.
However, if you take away that issue, if you take away that emotion, set the constitutional amendment part aside. Underlying this whole issue is a process. And we can make a process better. We have influence over a process. And we, not just us, but the members of Congress who were listening to my testimony. And that was our position. We can improve this process. We can make sure that that veteran, as sure as possible, make sure that veteran who's having trouble paying his or her bills is not a danger to self or others. And we can have a judicial authority review the package before that person's name goes to NICS. And that was our position. That's what we proposed, was to have a second medical screening once VA proposes incompetency, have a second medical screen to check that and to deter if that person is a danger to self or others. And then before we put that person's name on the NICS list, have it go through a judicial review and have a judicial authority say, yes, this person is a danger to self or others. Yes, this person is incompetent. Therefore, we're putting this name on NICS. So that was our whole point, was this is a process. It's not an emotion.
Right.
It's just take the Second Amendment rights aside and let's focus on the process.
But it feels emotional.
It's
you know what I mean?
very emotional.
Because as a veteran, if I suffered, I mean, it's very common. A lot of people get to a certain age,
Sure.
and depending on your health issues,
Yes.
you could suffer a stroke, and
Yes.
you can recover
But
from that stroke.
That was
That
a
was
real
one of the-
case. That was a real case to which I was referring during the hearing.
Okay.
I went,
That's right.
Yes. I went to NVS, National Veteran Service, for our audience out there, and I got a real case. Of course, blacked out the personal information, but it was a case of a veteran had just had a stroke. He applied for a caregiver benefit so his wife could be his caregiver and get reimbursed for that. And during the course of applying for that benefit, a VA administrator had to interview this person, interface with this person. And because of that, VA proposed incompetency for this veteran.
Oh.
Sent the letter to the House that said, we are proposing incompetency. At that point, when you get that letter, the veteran has 60 days to provide any kind of evidence to dispute that proposal.
Wow.
It was really strange to be,
Stroke.
for the hearing, there's a lot of focus on, well, it's a criminal background check system. And it just seems almost, off-putting to veterans that, unless a judge has made a determination that you could be put on a list that's generally reserved for criminals. Rob and I were talking on the way back from it. If you remove the emotion from it and start to talk about other rights, yeah, you can be deprived of other rights, but it's usually a judge who has to do that.
Well, yeah.
I mean, think if you were talking about your First Amendment rights.
Right.
Your right to free speech. Well, you have a fiduciary, so you no longer have a right to free speech. We're taking your social media accounts. We're taking that. It sounds absurd.
It does sound absurd.
Sure.
And what's crazy is this is only specific to veterans. Am I right? For right now, anyway.
Well,
It's supposed to extend to other federal agencies as well, but the
Ah.
spotlight really is on VA. Because of all the federal agencies that do submit names to NICS, VA sends about 98% of them. So it's very heavily focused on VA.
Interesting.
Yes.
my reading on it is it's because of the fiduciary process. Like it's spelled out so clearly, and then reading through those regulations, there's nothing in there about harm to yourself or others. And I think that's where
Yeah.
you made some excellent points that I hope the committee acts on about, look, we're talking about several different things here, all of which deserve to be addressed
Yes.
in the interest of the veteran.
Yes. I mean, just to put a little bit more context on this, there are two laws that govern this: the Gun Control Act of 1968 and the Brady Bill that was written in 1993. And in both of those laws, it says that a mental defective cannot own a firearm, purchase a firearm. What I just said about the firearms, a mental defective. Well, in its rulemaking years ago, about 15 plus years ago, ATF laid out a mental defective is, and VA interpreted the term mental defective as mental incompetent.
Mm-hmm.
And ATF did concur with VA's assessment of, we VA interpret the term mental defective as a mental incompetent. They're one and the same. So when we determine if somebody's incompetent because he or she can't handle VA benefits, and we determine that that person is incompetent, well, because incompetence to us means defective to us, That's why we proceed with sending the name off to the list.
Wow.
But right now, in the current process, there is no judicial review. There's no mental health check at all. There's have an interview. In this case, with the stroke veteran, he had an interview. He applied for a benefit, and VA proposed incompetence. Now, he was able to send information in to refute that, but that's up to VA. Once they get all the information in, then they will make a decision based on all the information they have, what the veteran sent and what they got from their interview of the veteran during the benefits process. And then they decide, we are going to determine that you are incompetent, and everything that goes with that term.
Wow. What a
It is very
Sharp.
highly charged issue.
highly charged issue. And it was evident for those that watch, and you can actually go online to the House of Veterans Affairs Committee's YouTube page, which has the YouTube link in there. You can find the video to that hearing, and so the thing is with some of these issues, when you talk about suicidal ideations and where it gets to, and having people step in, and there's a lot that goes into it, and it's, I think, at the very least, having the discussion and bringing attention to it, and trying to get to the bottom of solving this process. Like we said, last week, we can give it a relook, we can redo this process and make it better for everyone.
We are all in control of the process ultimately. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, good job, by the way. I thought you did a great job, and I look forward to more testimony from you.
I'm charged up. I want to do another one.
That's awesome. That's what we need. And then, speaking of charged up, Brittany, you had a testimony the day prior. Man, talk about it. This 100.
We're busy.
It was just busy. Last week.
Yeah, I tell you what, that was a very busy week. So you had your testimony, and it was about community care. Talk to us.
It was about community care. So, I used to be in the National Legislative Service. So this was, it was a bit unexpected that I was called, now that I'm part of communications, but it was a really important topic. So they were looking for veterans who had challenges accessing VA community care. And so really, it was a little bit different. Usually hearings are, about legislation or, so on and so forth, but this was more of a narrative hearing. So personal stories. And I spoke about my experience trying to navigate the community care system for inpatient mental health care for post-traumatic stress disorder. And it took quite a while. It took me over a year to finally land somewhere in some sort of care that was relatively appropriate for what my needs were, my diagnosis was or is. And it was a really emotional, similarly, not really in the same way, but it was an emotional hearing because there was some really powerful testimony there. And there's a mother of a veteran who died by suicide. There's another gentleman who's delays in getting community care has resulted, unfortunately, in his cancer worsening, which is heartbreaking as well. And another gentleman who had just seen the disparities between how the community care program is implemented over different regions that he had lived in. And so several different perspectives, none less important than another. The VFW believes that VA community care is VA care.
Right.
And we staunchly support the VA community care program as a necessary supplement, if you will, to the VA, to getting direct care from the VA healthcare system itself.
Right.
But unfortunately, that's not always feasible. And so in veterans, by and large, we, in polls, they tell us, they prefer to be at VA hospitals. And I agree. I've had almost 10 years now of VA care, and I don't have to go out into the community very often, but when I do, I expect it to work. expect it to work well. And if you look at our priority goals brochure for this year, in years past, it's making sure that these problems are fixed within the VA community care program. So seamless delivery of care and benefits. A veteran should be referred to the community. They should get timely care, not a long wait time. That's one of the reasons that veterans are sent out into the community, because VA can't accommodate in a timely manner, or they don't provide the service. VA doesn't provide the service itself, which was the case for me. So,
yeah, and I think it's important for people to understand that a lot of times when we talk about community care, the examples are always used the people in rural areas, right?
Right.
And so, and we live here. Oh, well, you know what, Brittany, you live in a medical or healthcare bubble in Washington,
That's
D.C.
true.
You should have everything available to you whenever you want. But that wasn't the case in your particular.
It absolutely hasn't. So you're right. We often do speak about, veterans in rural areas who need access to the, appropriate healthcare, timely, appropriate healthcare. But no, we're in the National Capital Region. In this, this challenge that I faced was with the Washington, D.C. VA.
Yeah.
So, the crux of it was, I have I have complex PTSD, as it's called. And my written testimony is online, and so is the hearing, which you can access on the House Veterans Affairs YouTube channel. And so my case requires specific types of treatments, and I was not getting those through the VA, and then also the DoD. Like back when I was on active duty, I didn't get like really the correct diagnosis, which means, as I mentioned before, not every treatment is appropriate for every veteran. It's not a one size fits all thing. And so me and my therapist and I were diligently trying to ensure that after 10 years, give or take, of me getting arguably not the most effective treatments, we wanted to make sure that I got, an appropriate program that was suitable for my specific needs.
Right.
And that was really difficult because the first program that she recommended happened to be in Utah. Well,
Wait a minute. It was a VA program in Utah?
it wasn't a VA program, but it's a military and veterans specific program, run, I believe, by a civilian run program. So not DoD or VA run, but they specialize in helping service members and veterans with PTSD and similar challenges. So that was the first program that she recommended because it was military and veteran centric. They had a women's only program. It met my time requirements, because some programs are very long, on the order of 3 months or so, and unfortunately that just wasn't feasible for me. So this program met a bunch of criteria, including specialized treatment modalities, and so she did my referral, and ultimately the DC VA said nope.
Out of network.
Out of network. It's too far away. And what they meant by that was it's not on the East Coast, it's on the West Coast, which is managed by a different provider, a different healthcare network. So it's Tri-West Healthcare Alliance that manages that entire region. And over here on the East Coast, it's Optum. It's called Optum Serve. And so from that simple, they looked at it very, very linearly, if you will, or in a vacuum, and they denied the request regardless of the reasons substantiating my need to go there. They just outright denied it because of where it was physically located.
I thought it was great in the hearing because that prompted a follow-up question to ask if VA ever delivers care outside of the geographic region, because we know they do it all the time.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, and especially like for those of us that, and you as well, Brittany, when we were in Afghanistan, right? If they couldn't treat your needs or meet your medical needs there at Bagram or Kandahar, where were you going?
Exactly.
You were going to launch.
Lodge still. Hey,
And you're well, wait a minute. They only care for Europe.
Right.
Yeah.
People were flown out of country to go get that care. Right. So that's a great point.
I thought it was weird too because they weren't saying it was out of network for VA's community care program. it was just out of this arbitrary network, and it left us scratching our heads like, that's not how that works.
No.
Interesting.
No. And so what was frustrating is that this facility said that they get requests from the East Coast all the time, and they have to turn veterans away because they run into the same problem.
Oh, wow.
And so there's this program that's specialized for service members and veterans, and we'll say inconsistent at best. Only some veterans and service members can get the care that they offer, and which is not okay. Inconsistency is never okay. What's true for one veteran should not be untrue for another in terms of, there should be consistency across the board. That's not there. And so another subsequent example that I brought up was my second attempt to go to inpatient treatment, which was even more specialized and met very specific criteria, but this one was in Arizona. Well, guess what? That's also in what they call Community Care Network 4, and immediately shot down. Nope, can't go there. It's out of this network.
Wow.
What was troubling is that I had spoken with somebody from that specific program, and they said that service members and veterans from the East Coast do come there.
That's even worse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And with the caveat that I just needed to convince my VA doctor that I needed to go there so that they can advocate on my behalf.
Oh, wow.
So that spoke volumes that, okay, so some veterans and service members from this area are allowed to access that program, but others are not. And so it's like a rational.
Or more equal than other.
Exactly. So our VFW's contention was, look, veterans need the right care the first time. It saves lives, especially when we're talking about, mental health, cancers,
Oh, man.
things that are, literally life-threatening.
Yeah.
Veterans who need, life-saving care, whatever that looks like, should not be forced to jump through hoops. And it should never be arbitrary in terms of what the criteria are for that veteran to access that care. It needs to be thoughtful. And by no means should decisions lie solely on geographic location.
Right.
It has to be a holistic look at what is appropriate for that veteran. And this is something maybe Ryan wants to chime in on. But
Are you sure?
Ryan Rees, he said
I have a lot of thoughts on this topic.
Okay, now before we go any further on this, okay, I want to reiterate something that we had said. Okay, and that is about the VA, right? So there's a lot of people that love to complain about the VA, and rightfully so with some of these things, right? But
some things, yes.
we talked about this before. There's some things, they need to improve on, but that care is there. That the medical care is there through the VA, and that is a benefit we have earned. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of a thing. We need to, and hey, you could sit there and complain all you want. Well, we've decided, let's go ahead and advocate to make it better.
Yeah. Look, I'm a high utilizer of VA programs and services. I'm enrolled in care. I've used the VA home loan, used the GI Bill, what have you. But I think, first of all, Brittany, thank you for being willing to share your story. Look, it was insane that it played out that way when you think of why the community care program is there. And this led to other fights that we had with Congress, like the Dole Act and some of their provisions to make community care in the best medical interest of veterans more readily available, to reinforce that provision. It's been like, look, I don't understand why there's 23 different ways of implementing VA community care or across the 23 different service networks. And I think that's our greatest gripe. I like VA care. VA care has intervened and helped me a lot, to include the Vet Center in Annapolis in 2021. Now, but the dilemma that we have is that VA, in delivering its community care authority, hasn't met veterans' expectations, or in my opinion, the legislators' expectations. veterans come out of the military. They navigated TRICARE. They navigated the military healthcare system. And the military healthcare system, albeit a bit more mature in using their community networks, those referrals happen in a much more timely manner. And so when the uniform comes off and then the veteran is starting to navigate the VA system, what I've observed over the years is they wonder, why doesn't it work anything like that system that I just came out of? It's not antagonistic toward VA, saying, VA, you're not delivering care. It's like, I want you to deliver care when and where it's needed, the way the military did.
Obviously, very emotional issue, right? Hey, but I think that's a great point, Ryan. And I harp on this all the time because, I retired from the Army after 24 years and coming out and going, I think I'll just stick with TRICARE because, and that may be not the right answer, but that is, as a retiree, like I have that choice. So many veterans don't have that choice. And so why should it be different, right? I think the electronic healthcare record, man, that's one thing we've been talking about for a long time.
We'll have that in unfinished business over the next.
That's unfinished business.
That's also in our priority goal.
Nancy, I mean, I know you and I, and everybody, because you guys served, we were all there in service around the same time. We're not walking around with these red folders anymore, about that thick, if I can get on camera, about that thick of all your medical ailments and injuries and stuff like that. It's all online when it comes to TRICARE. Yet, there's such a problem getting all that and handing it over to the VA.
And look, some of this, I think, we talked about this with the former VA secretary many times, that lean on your third-party administrators to implement this program. Lean on your third-party administrators to implement your electronic health record, because what we see on the DoD side is a much more seamless experience.
Quite.
Records transfer in a timely manner because they have a fully implemented electronic health record that links with private healthcare systems. They also have a mature process for referring veterans to those community providers, where DoD isn't worried that, oh no, I'm going to send Nancy out, so I'm going to lose $1. Look, I swear the veteran demand signal is there. And veterans are enrolling in VA because it's a good healthcare option.
Sure.
It is quality care. VA hospitals perform well. VA care providers perform well. But there's a lot of veterans who need a lot of care.
Yeah.
And so that's where the community needs to step in through these networks. But also VA can't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
You can't view it as a one-size-fits-all. Well, if I send Rob to the community, then Nancy doesn't get care. That's not how it works.
Right. Okay, so I'm glad that you brought up the former Sec VA, because we do have a new Sec VA. But before we go, I want to get to you, Brittany. What other things you want to, because this is your second time testifying for Congress.
It was.
And there was so much in that testimony. I highly advise people out there to go out there and watch that testimony, because it was powerful. The mother that was there talking about her son, the gentleman who his cancer advanced, waiting for care, and the other gentleman thankfully was intervened. He was a spokesperson from every town that came over there. But these four very different stories about that. And let's just hope that our 119th Congress does something to make positive effect on that.
I would, and I think they may. They seemed, the members who were there, it was a full committee hearing, so it was not a subcommittee hearing. Most of the members, as available, are attended, and some of them were pretty upset, understandably so, at what they were hearing, and I think, and I said it, after the hearing, it emboldened to make change to ensure that VA is appropriately and consistently adhering to and implementing the Mission Act of 2018.
As they should, because we vote these folks into office and give them trust and confidence that they're going to do things on our behalf, and we want them to get motivated to do things, and not just sit there in a Congress that doesn't pass a single bill for their entire time being in session, or maybe minimal bills. But I don't know.
Dole got done on like the last day.
Yeah. Well, yes, the Dole Act did get done.
Or the 2023 Veterans Day package, as we used to call it.
Right. So it was his first name, but this stuff needs to be talked about. It needs to be discussed. Some of these issues are more difficult to talk about than others. It's not easy to. The first testimony I did in person, I've done written testimonies in the past, but the first one was very different. Talking about transition, and that military transition, and how important it is to ensure service members are taken care of, and those that are at risk for challenges during transition are identified and taken care of appropriately, ensure that they're equipped with the tools they need to be successful. And at the root of that was suicide prevention, right? And so looking at it, it's the same through line. It was the same through line with this testimony as well, as suicide prevention.
Right.
I know that I think, Ryan, you brought it up. We don't want to harp on on negative things because there's so much value to service.
Yeah.
It is a reality, though, and it would be, I think, negligent of us if we didn't speak about some of these challenges that are there. They do exist. They're real. So how do we mitigate them? How do we try to eliminate them?
Yeah.
And one of them is ensuring that service members are taken care of if they're at risk on their way out of the service, identifying them and getting the tools that they need to be successful. On the other side of the fence, as a veteran, if you're a veteran who is maybe exposed to toxic exposures and maybe you have a cancer diagnosis or maybe a potential one, you need care immediately to ensure that it's not progressing to stage 3, stage 4 without being treated, right? So, and same thing with mental health care. It's also dangerous.
Yeah.
If a veteran is not getting timely and appropriate, I can't harp on that enough, appropriate mental health care, that might be their last time asking for help.
And, I know people have said tired losing friends.
Yes.
But I've lost a couple to their demons when they got out of service and, different ways of taking their lives. But, I would like to see us get to the left of that.
Yes.
And I think that's where the advocacy efforts of all of us, to include some of our, sister organizations that are out there, it's so important that we be able to do that work and walk the halls of Congress and testify at hearings and get after this thing because, like you said, it could be the last time that they ask for help.
Exactly.
So we have an opportunity to do so while we are still living and have breath. So with that, we brought up earlier, Ryan, Sec VA. We had, Secretary McDonough. What was last week? Or that was the week before. He had left. I think it was the week before. You were in Europe when it happened, but he had left. Friend of the veterans for a lot of us. He's great to work with. Now we have a nominee. Right now, the confirmation hearings are going for Doug Collins, who's a representative from Georgia. Our national commander actually knows him, so had sent him a letter congratulating him on his nomination. And so Doug Collins he's a military veteran. He's actually a chaplain. And so that empathy, you would think, would be there for veterans, and that would carry over, especially in his own experience and what he's done ministering to veterans. So, it's good to see somebody that has a military background. Oh, of course, not necessary to be a secretary. We understand that, but it does help for understanding what some of us go through. Would you say so, Ryan?
Well, yes. So in case you're living under a very large rock, we are going through a transition in our government where there's a new presidential administration, a new Congress. Yeah. And so with that new administration comes new cabinet secretaries. And so Doug Collins is President Trump's nominee to serve as the next Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Last week, sorry. They're all blending together.
All blending.
Last week, the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee hosted the confirmation hearing for Mr. Collins. I had an opportunity to go over and attend the hearing. More just to hear from him firsthand on what his vision is for VA. And as you put it, look, he's a veteran like all of us at this table, served overseas, served in Iraq, and really, it was a very bipartisan hearing, and it was a very refreshing hearing to be a part of. He was advanced out of committee by a vote of 18-1, which is almost remarkable to hear him. Very bipartisan vote.
That's really great.
But again, the hearing, both sides of the aisle praised Mr. Collins for, first of all, his transparency, sitting down with their offices before the hearing, but also while he was a member of Congress, was known for his bipartisanship. I think at a time, when we're going through such a drastic transition of government, that having strong veteran leadership within Department of Veterans Affairs is going to be key.
Yeah.
In making sure that veterans receive seamless benefits, seamless access to care. Now, that said, there were a number of themes throughout the hearing, which I think are pretty reassuring for the VFW. Now, look, we think that he's going to be confirmed once the Senate puts him to the floor. I mean, an 18-1 vote pretty much indicates that he's likely to serve as our next VA secretary.
Sure.
But there were some challenging questions, one of which was about things that we've heard about or read about in The Economist, about veterans benefits and the generosity of veterans benefits, the cost of veterans benefits. It was reassuring to hear Mr. Collins say, in no uncertain terms, we're not going to balance the budget on the backs of veterans.
Hear, hear.
Very positive to hear. Again, the VFW, we've been out there with that message, honor the contract, that the benefits that our service members and veterans receive aren't just a good idea. They're not just out of the benevolence of a grateful nation. No, they're a part of our contract. They were part of my enlistment contract. They're part of the enlistment contract that young Americans are signing today. And in that contract, we commit to things like serving in hazardous areas, being ordered to do things that we may not, probably don't want to do.
Subject to the UCMJ?
Yes, subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, that we're no longer common citizens. We are now members of the United States military. There are all of these commitments that we make when we join the military as part of our contract. The last part is the commitment of our government to take care of us and provide us the benefits that we've earned. And what we say in the VFW is we honored our contract. It's time for our nation to ensure that they honor their side of the contract.
Right.
What we heard from Mr. Collins is very encouraging.
Good.
I certainly believe that he's committed to honoring that contract. Discussions on access to care, discussions on access to benefits, discussions on transition, which I was really grateful to hear. He seems to be very transition focused in his comments, which is one of our cornerstone programs.
Huge deal.
As Brittany,
It's very exciting.
Because for even since the VOW Act of 2012, that was supposed to really bring VA and DoD together in addressing the transition issues. It's better. It's gotten better.
Sure.
Not where it needs to be.
Right.
So to hear the potential incoming secretary speak about transition with such a focus, I think was encouraging.
Well, I think that this is an opportunity for, those. Now we're going to have two. Secretary Hegseth was just sworn in this past weekend.
Yes.
And so also a veteran, for there to be, and I don't know who puts this together, but two secretaries coming together to let's rediscuss this transition. We need to have these kind of discussions. And both of them transitioned out of the military. Actually, I think he's still serving, right? Doug Collins is still in, or is he retired now?
I'm not sure. I actually don't remember.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Anyway, cut. But that's something that they both served and both understand what it means to transition out of the military, or in a certain degree, and have their own experiences. And they need to hear from all of us to understand how we can make transition better, and the handoff from one organization to the other.
Perspective, I think, is also very important. And Doug Collins shared personal anecdotes in his hearing. I'll encourage people watching to go watch the hearing for yourself. I won't steal his story,
Sure,
because it was deeply personal. But again, having served as a chaplain, we're talking about things like mental health. We're talking about speaking up. He's been in those situations where he's had to be that reliable ear to a service member who is facing challenges. And I think that perspective is going to inform his leadership style for VA.
Well, that's really great and really encouraging to hear. And we need people to go on there and check out the hearings online if you see them.
Senate Veterans Affairs Committee hosted that one.
Yeah,
So in there, right?
and do your research. As they say, I do my own research. I look online. Brittany, where are we right now?
So I think that we have arrived at good of the order.
We have arrived at the good of the order. All right, look. I'm not very happy with what happened yesterday. I'm not a Chiefs fan. I'm not a Bills fan. I'm not an Eagles fan. And I'm just to be honest, and Ryan, you understand my pain. I am a Patriots fan. So it has been difficult these last few years. Although, to be honest,
Mike Vrabel is coming home.
Mike Vrabel is coming home. So
And Josh McDaniels. Probably more importantly, Josh McDaniels.
yes, absolutely. But it is hard to watch all these teams going, and now you have new dynasties with Kansas City, which I would say, man, it makes it even worse with the Swifties that have come on board.
No, well, hold on. Hold up.
Oh, you might be
They are
Swift-
good for the NFL.
Okay,
She is good for the NFL.
all right. But it's not for the reasons that we'd hope that. Yeah, okay, maybe they are.
Shake it up.
Football. All right.
Oh, geez. See if
I see what you did there. Yes. But players gonna play. Sorry.
And the haters gonna hate.
Oh, just
That's what
I am a hater. I have to. It's one of those things. But I have been excited about Washington, the Commanders story.
Yeah.
I mean, really great over this last year.
that would have been cool.
That would have been awesome because wouldn't it have been
The first time in 32 years, 33 years.
You know, it's kind of scary because I talked to my wife. And
The
it's like,
year after Dan Snyder sells it.
oh man, yeah, that was like that. It just happens. I heard a stat yesterday. It said that only 3 members of the Commanders were alive when they were last in the playoffs.
Good.
No, they were in the playoffs. They won the division a few years ago.
Oh,
Probably the last time they were at Last time they were in the Super Bowl.
last time they were. Sorry, Aaron. Fact. Thank you for correcting me. But
Fact checker on the show.
that's what I have.
You should probably.
We should have that, right? We need that fact checker. Boy, I'm spouting off all things that aren't true. Disinformation, Rob. But we have a Super Bowl. I'm not happy about it because the folks over in Kansas City are where our national headquarters are. Almost the majority of them are all Chiefs fans. And I just have to hear it from them with their Go Chiefs and their jabs. And I was so hoping for the Bills to win, but they didn't, alas. I don't know what they're going to do.
Our quartermaster general is from Delaware, and so I hope he is rooting for the Eagles because he signs our paychecks.
Well, he's an Eagles. Has he told you he's an Eagles fan?
I don't know. Fact checker.
I don't have my.
Mark, are you an Eagles fan?
Yeah. Anyway, so what's your thoughts on this upcoming Super Bowl? You going to watch it at all, Nancy?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, our VFW post will have a party, and judging for the last couple parties, it's going to be a good party.
It's just the party celebrating a game of sorts
Watch the
that
game,
you can't.
camaraderie,
Yes.
party, pizza, all that.
That's right.
I love
The team's been out for a while.
At Green Bay.
Yeah,
There you
Hey, they made the playoffs this year.
They did make the playoffs. Yes, they did make the playoffs.
They got
I said you should have worn your cheese hat today, just because.
I should have.
You
I'd
should.
known I would have brought in my cheesehead hat.
Oh, well,
I
next time we'll make sure that you have your cheese head.
Unfinished business.
Yes. Ryan, what do you think?
I think that I am certainly going to watch the game. It's hard on who to root for this one because look, I do sympathize a little bit with our colleagues out of the Kansas City headquarters, having been a Patriots fan for the length of that dynasty. They're getting all of the same ribbings that we got. It's the refs, it's this, it's that, it's the other thing. I don't know. They might just be good at football. They
Live
might
long enough to
good.
become a villain.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy to fly under the radar while Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels build their next empire. But what I will say is I'll probably be rooting for the Eagles. I just think it's hilarious that the Titans let A.J. Brown walk, that the Giants let Saquon Barkley walk to a division rival.
He's sick from market yesterday.
I mean,
You're
insane.
Awesome.
I wanted him to have the Al Bundy, though. I wanted him to get that 4th touchdown in a single game.
Right.
But
Brittany, do you know what he's talking?
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know that either.
I can't.
I don't know that either.
I can't speak intelligently at all about football.
Okay. Well, and so I was going to say this because I thought, because you're originally from Pennsylvania.
I am, yes.
Okay. And so because you're originally from Pennsylvania, I thought, well, maybe she's wearing the green because, Philadelphia had a win, but that's not even the case, is it?
No, I didn't actually. I didn't know they would until today.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Like,
wait, that means a certain somebody was probably not watching the game.
yeah, he was.
Okay.
I was busy painting a room yesterday.
Oh.
Yeah,
No. Okay, well.
but I'll probably cheer for the Eagles, I guess, because I feel
go
obligatory.
sports teams. Yeah, go sports team.
Basically. But yeah, probably Eagles because, native Pennsylvanian. Originally from Pennsylvania, so.
Well, hey,
Yeah.
look, I thank each one of you for being on the show today and the podcast, one and the same, and talking about all these great things. It's good. I remind people out there, hey, you need to go online to go see these congressional testimonies that they're having, the confirmation hearings. Get yourself educated about what's going on so you can become an informed voter and an informed advocate on behalf of veterans in your community. So until next time, I'm Rob Couture reminding you that when it comes to the VFW, we are still serving. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Still Serving, the VFW podcast. To get the latest news and information from the veterans of foreign wars, make sure to follow, like, and subscribe to us on social media at VFW HQ, on Facebook at VFW Fans, or visit our website at vfw.org.